Friday, February 5th, 2021. An operator sits alone in the water control room of Oldsmar, a town of 15,000 people on the west coast of Florida. It is an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day when nothing happens. He is staring at a 24-inch monitor, the same kind of screen you have at home. The room is small, with a noisy air conditioning and the constant hum of servers. The water that feeds the entire city flows through that system. He looks at the screen. The mouse cursor begins to move on its own. Someone is controlling that computer remotely. He watches the control software open out of nowhere. Someone types commands. The levels of sodium hydroxide, normally held at 100 parts per million, climb to 11,100, 100 times above the safe level. If that command had continued for a few more minutes, that water would have reached the taps of 15,000 people. The operator realizes what is happening. He disconnects the system immediately. The city woke up the next morning and turned on its taps as usual. But it almost did not wake up at all. There is a number that should be on the cover of every magazine in the world. It is on none of them. That number is 3018. This is the number of cyber attacks that targeted critical infrastructure around the world in the first half of 2025 alone. 6 months. That means more than 16 attacks every single day. Every 90 minutes, somewhere on the planet, someone is trying to break into a hospital, a power plant, a water system, an electrical grid. We are not losing this war. We are already inside it. We are just standing on the wrong side. To understand what is happening now, we need to go back to December 23rd, 2015. Not out of nostalgia, because on that day the world changed without noticing. 3 power distribution companies in western Ukraine received a seemingly normal email. An employee opened an attachment that looked like a billing spreadsheet. Inside that spreadsheet was the black energy malware. The attackers did not strike the power grid directly. They first attacked an office, a place with no apparent strategic value. From inside that office, they began to navigate. They found the network credentials of other employees and escalated privileges. And then they found the SCADA systems, the same control systems that manage entire substations, that open and close the flow of electricity to millions of people, without anyone physically touching a breaker, without a single bomb. The attackers opened circuit breakers remotely through software commands. The result, 230,000 people in the dark, for 6 hours, in winter, below freezing. Hospitals had to switch to generators. The elderly in care homes were left without heating. This was the first computer-induced blackout in human history. The lesson the world learned and then forgot: attacking critical infrastructure does not require an army. It requires a laptop and an email. Let us understand why these attacks are different from ordinary ransomware against a tech company. A normal company loses data when it is attacked. Critical infrastructure loses control of the systems that keep entire cities running. It is not about stealing information. It is about having the power to shut things down. In October 2024, American Water Works, the largest regulated water utility in the United States, serving 14 million people across 14 states, detected suspicious cyber activity in its corporate systems. The company did not wait to see what would happen. It disconnected the customer portal and paused billing systems. Operations were restored within days. The water quality, which is what really matters, was not compromised this time. But American Water is not a startup with 3 employees and weak security. It is a publicly traded company with dedicated infrastructure and security experts. If they were hit, imagine a small town in rural America. Imagine a water treatment station running the same kind of SCADA software, but without the same attention to security. The problem is not the big companies. It is everyone who depends on systems that no one is watching. Now let us go to another scenario. You are in the hospital. You have surgery scheduled for tomorrow morning. But today the computer screens go black. The electronic record system, the one that holds your blood type, your allergies, the medications you take, simply stops responding. This is not fiction. It happened in more than 50 American hospitals in just the last 2 years. Researchers at the University of Minnesota decided to study what happens to patients during these attacks. The result was disturbing. In-hospital mortality rises 33% during ransomware attacks on healthcare institutions. 33%. That means for every 100 patients who would normally die in these hospitals, 33 more die because the systems were down, not because the hackers wanted to kill people, but because medicine depends on information. When information disappears, medicine fails. Tests done before the attack do not appear in the system. Prescribed medications are lost. Surgical teams have no access to patient history, and in an emergency, every second counts. When we talk about war, most people imagine soldiers, tanks, fighter jets. The reality is that the wars of the 21st century began long before any shot was fired. They began inside the systems you use every day. Volt Typhoon is a group linked to the Chinese government that American intelligence has been tracking for years. The accusation is not ordinary espionage. It is pre-positioning. That means they are inside the systems that keep power plants running, water flowing, hospitals operating. They are not there to steal industrial secrets. They are there to learn, to map, to know exactly where the vulnerabilities are. A cyber leader from the US Air Force said openly in a congressional hearing that this kind of presence gives China the ability to wage what he called total war against the United States. Total war without a single soldier on American soil. In January 2026, something caught the attention of security analysts across Europe. Poland, a NATO member on Europe's eastern border, suffered a wave of attacks on roughly 30 facilities linked to its power grid. The group behind the attack was identified as Electrum, with known ties to Russian intelligence services. What made this attack different was not its size. 30 facilities sounds like a lot, but it did not cause a widespread blackout. What worried the analysts was something else. The attackers did not just try to break into computer systems. They tried to damage the physical operational technology equipment, the systems that control what happens in the substations, the circuits that actually turn the lights on and off. Think about what that means. It is no longer just about breaking into a server and encrypting files. It is about having access to the system that controls the flow of electricity across an entire country. The question investigators began to ask was direct. If the Russians already have access to Poland's power grid, what happens when they decide to use it? But the more disturbing truth is this. The Russians do not need to wait to decide. They already decided. The presence inside the system is the decision. Every day they spend in there is a day of reconnaissance, mapping, learning, and when the right moment comes, they will not need to break in again. They will already be home. Let us talk about money, because money is the language that CEOs and politicians understand. The FBI received thousands of formal ransomware complaints in 2025 alone, with reported losses in the tens of millions of dollars. But that is only the reported number. Companies that pay ransoms are not required to disclose it. Many do not even report the attack out of fear of looking weak. So the real number is bigger, much bigger. In the third quarter of 2025 alone, losses tied to cyber attacks on industrial systems, power plants, factories, distribution networks, reached $329 billion. That number is larger than the entire economy of countries like Hungary or Qatar. We are talking about a destruction of value greater than national economies, happening in silence without bombs, without visible armed conflict. And in the healthcare sector, the average data breach cost $7.4 million per incident in 2024, the highest ever recorded for any sector. Why does this happen? Because a hospital whose data is held hostage cannot simply stop. It has patients dying, so it pays. It pays fast, it pays high, and the attackers know it. That is the problem with critical infrastructure. It cannot stop. and neither can the people who depend on it. There is a detail almost no one mentions when we talk about cyber attacks. The reason these attacks are becoming more frequent and more dangerous. Right now, there are 18 billion IoT devices, the Internet of Things, connected around the world. By 2030, there will be 40 billion. Each of those devices is a door, a window, a potential entry point for anyone who wants to cause chaos. A power plant has thousands of these devices spread across miles of terrain. A water treatment station has hundreds of sensors, each connected to a network. Each one is a vulnerability. The operator in Oldsmar was there. He noticed the cursor moving on its own and acted. That is why we are here. That is why you watched until now. But what happens when no one is watching, and when the attack hits 3 systems at once: water, power, and hospitals? We do not need to be afraid. We need to be aware. And now you are.